Welcome to the Rabbit Hole Chronicles, a podcast where we delve into the mysteries and stories of the past. I'm your host, Joe Foster, and in today's episode, we're going to take a close look at one of the most infamous serial killers in history, Jack the Ripper. In the late 19th century, the streets of Whitechapel, a district in London's East End, were plagued by a series of gruesome murders. 5 women, all of them prostitutes, were found brutally killed and mutilated in a way that suggested the murderer had some knowledge of the human anatomy. Despite extensive investigations, the killer was never caught, and his identity remains a mystery to this day. The 5 canonical victims of Jack the Ripper were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Edoise, and Mary Jane Kelly. The murderers occurred between August and November of 1888, and the victims were all killed in a similar manner. Their throats were slashed, and their bodies were mutilated. Born on August 26, 1845, Mary Ann Nichols, also known as Polly, was the first of the canonical 5 victims. She was married and had 5 children, but separated from her husband, William Nichols, in 1881. After the separation, she lived in various workhouses and boarding houses, often resorting to prostitution to make ends meet. On August 31, 1881, Polly was found dead in Bucks Row, Whitechapel. Her throat had been deeply slashed, and her abdomen was mutilated with several deep cuts. It was this murder that triggered the beginning of the Jack the Ripper investigations. Annie Chapman was born on September 25, 1841. She was married to John Chapman and had 3 children. However, after the death of one of their children, both Annie and John became heavy drinkers, leading to their separation in 1884. Polly, Annie lived in various lodging houses and occasionally engaged in prostitution. On September 8, 1888, Annie's body was discovered in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her throat was slashed, and her abdomen was extensively mutilated. The killer had also removed her uterus, fueling the speculation that Jack the Ripper had some knowledge of the human anatomy. Born on November 27th, 1843, Elizabeth Stride was a Swedish immigrant who moved to London in 1866. She married John Thomas Stride, but their marriage deteriorated due to her alcoholism and alleged infidelity. They separated in the late 1870s, and Elizabeth eventually turned to prostitution. On September 30th, 1888, Elizabeth was found dead in Dutsfield Yard, off Burner Street. Her throat had been slashed, but her body wasn't mutilated like the previous victims. This led to some to question whether her murder was committed by Jack the Ripper or if it was the work of a copycat. Catherine Edoise was born on April 14, 1842. She had a common-law husband, Thomas Conway, with whom she had 3 children. They separated in 1881 due to her alcoholism. Seems a common thing here. All these women are drunks. After they like to drink and they're prostitutes. Anyways, I digress. Afterward, Catherine lived with John Kelly in various lodging houses in the East End. On the same night as Elizabeth Stride's murder, September 30th, 1888, Catherine's body was discovered in Mitre Square. I don't know. Her throat was cut and her body was mutilated in a manner consistent with the earlier Ripper murderers. Her left kidney and part of her uterus had been removed, further supporting the theory that the killer had knowledge of the human anatomy. Mary Jane Kelly, the youngest and final canonical victim, was born around 1863. Little is known about her early life, but it's believed she was married and widowed before moving to London. She lived with a man named Joseph Barnett before turning to prostitution. On November 9th, 1888, Mary Jane was found brutally murdered in her room at 13 Miller's Court. Her throat was slashed, and her body was horrifically mutilated, with many organs removed and scattered around the room. The severity of this attack was far greater than the previous murders, making a grisly end to the canonical killings. The name Jack the Ripper comes from a letter allegedly written by the killer himself, sent to the police and newspapers in 1888. However, the authenticity of this letter, as well as several others attributed to the killer, has been questioned. With that in mind, let's get into these letters here. The most famous letters associated with Jack the Ripper case are the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter. These letters were allegedly written by the killer himself, but as stated before, the authenticity has been the subject of much debate. The Dear Boss letter was sent to the Central News Agency on September 27, 1888. In this letter, the writer claimed responsibility for the murders and referred to himself as Jack the Ripper for the first time. The letter included details of the murders as well as taunts directed at the police. It also contained a chilling promise to keep killing and even mentioned the desire to clip the lady's ears off. A few days later, Catherine Edoise, one of the victims, was found with her earlobe cut, which seemed to lend credibility to the letter. The Saucy Jackie postcard was received by the Central News Agency on October 1st, 1888. It referred to the double murder of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Edoise on September 30th, 1888. The postcard's writer claimed that the police had not found all the mutilations on the victims and boasted about his ability to avoid capture. The From Hell letter was sent to George Lusk, the head of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, on October 16, 1888. It was accompanied by a small box containing half a human kidney, which the writer claimed to have taken from one of the victims. Just as a reminder, Catherine Edoise was missing a kidney. The letter's author described how he cooked and ate the other half of the kidney, and taunted Lusk, stating that he may yet send you the bloody knife that took it out if you only wait a while longer. The authenticity of these letters has been widely debated. Some argue that the letters could have been written by the killer, as they contain accurate details of the crimes and demonstrate a similar writing style. However, others believe that the letters were hoax, possibly created by journalists looking to sensationalize the story and sell more newspapers. It has also been suggested that some of the letters might have been written by different individuals, either trying to confuse the investigation or seeking attention. Handwriting analysis was not provided conclusive evidence, and the debate over the authenticity of the letters continues to this day. The murders of Jack the Ripper prompted one of the largest manhunts in British history. Despite this, the killer was never caught, and his identity remains unknown. In the late 19th century, investigative methods were still relatively primitive compared to modern standards. The use of fingerprinting and DNA analysis was not yet available, and the police relied heavily on eyewitness accounts, interviews, and physical evidence found at the crime scenes. Detectives conducted door-to-door inquiries, searched for suspicious individuals, and gathered information from locals. They also consulted with medical experts to determine the killer's possible background and skill set. Several key figures were involved in the Jack the Ripper investigations. one being Sir Charles Warren, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner at the time. Warren faced criticism from his handling of the case and eventually resigned in November of 1888. Frederick Aberline, a skilled detective and inspector. Aberline was a key investigator on the case, and many of his notes and reports have since been used to study the murderers. Edmund Reed, a local detective inspector. Reed was involved in the investigation and had extensive knowledge of the Whitechapel area. Donald Swanson, a senior officer in the Metropolitan Police. Swanson was responsible for coordinating the Ripper investigation. And Dr. Thomas Bond, not James Bond. Thomas Bond was a police surgeon, assisted in several autopsy examinations of the victims, and provided his expert opinion on the killer's possible skills and motivations. The police faced numerous challenges during the investigation. Limited forensic methods and technology, the absence of advanced forensic techniques made it difficult to conclusively link physical evidence to the killer. Inaccurate and unreliable eyewitness accounts, conflicting testimonies, and a lack of reliable witnesses made it challenging to build a clear picture of the suspect. Difficulty in tracking the killer's movements, the crowded and poorly lit streets of the Whitechapel provided ample opportunities for the killer to evade capture. And the pressure from the public and the media, the high-profile nature of the case, and the media's sensationalized coverage added to the pressure on the police to solve the crimes quickly. Now, the impact that the media had over this case was they had a pretty significant role in shaping the Jack the Ripper case. Newspapers provided extensive coverage of the murders with detailed accounts and illustrations of the crime scenes. The sensationalism in reporting fueled public fear and fascination with the case, turning Jack the Ripper into an infamous figure. The media also played a part in dismantling the letters allegedly written by the killer, including the Dear Boss letter that gave rise to the name Jack the Ripper. This further amplified the public's interest in the case, but it also led to numerous false leads and hindered the investigation. Additionally, the media's portrayal of the victims, the East End of London, and the police perceived incompetence contributed to the overall narrative and legacy of the Jack the Ripper case. Over the years, countless suspects have been proposed as the identity of Jack the Ripper. Some theories point to individuals with medical training, while others suggest the involvement of prominent figures or even a group of killers. Montague John Druitt, I believe that's that last name's pronounced correctly. Montague was a barrister and school teacher who committed suicide in December of 1888, shortly after the last canonical murder. Sir Melville, a high-ranking police officer, named Druitt as a suspect in a private 1894 memorandum, stating that the murderer was a sexually insane doctor who killed himself after the Kelly murder. However, Druitt wasn't a doctor, and there was no concrete evidence linking him to the murderers. The timing of his suicide, and Melville's suspicion have kept Druitt's name attached to the case. Aaron Kosminski was a Polish Jewish immigrant who lived in the Whitechapel area during the time of the murders. He was admitted to an insane asylum in 1891, suffering from auditory hallucinations and paranoid schizophrenia. At the time, several officials believed that the killer was a local Jewish man. Aaron's mental illness and proximity to the crime scenes made him a suspect. In 2014, a controversial DNA study claimed to have found a match between Aaron and a shawl allegedly belonging to one of the victims. However, The study has been widely criticized for its methodology and lack of peer review. Dr. Thomas Neil Cream was a Canadian doctor and convicted serial killer. He was executed in 1892 for poisoning 4 women in London. After his arrest, he was discovered that he had also committed similar crimes in Chicago. Some believe that Cream was in London during the time of the Ripper murders and had the medical knowledge consistent with the mutilations. However, records indicate that Cream was imprisoned in Illinois during the murders, making it highly unlikely that he was Jack the Ripper. Francis Tumblety was an American quack doctor with a history of criminal activity. He was in London during the time of the murders and was arrested in November 1888 for an unrelated offense. Tumblety's suspicious behavior and his alleged collection of female organs have led some to consider him a suspect. After his release on bail, Tumblety fled to the United States, and the murderers seemed to stop. Despite the circumstantial evidence, there is no definitive proof linking Tumblety to the killings. And Walter Sickert. That's Sickert. Sickert, not cigarette. Okay. Walter Sickert was a prominent British painter who became a suspect in the 20th century after crime novelist Patricia Cornwell published a book implicating him in the murders. Cornwell believed that Sickert's paintings contained clues pointing to his guilt and that he had the necessary anatomy knowledge. However, her theories have been widely criticized for their speculative nature and lack of concrete evidence. Many experts dismiss the idea that Sickert was involved in the Ripper murders. While these are some of the most popular suspects, none of them have been definitively proven to be Jack the Ripper. The case remains unsolved, and it is likely that new theories and suspects will continue to emerge as people remain fascinated by this enduring mystery. I, for one, am pointing my finger at Francis Tumblety. It's very suspect that he leaves and then the murders stop. But what do y'all think? So the case of the Jack the Ripper has left a lasting impact on popular culture and criminology. It has inspired countless books, movies, documentaries, and theories, and continues to be a topic of fascination and debate. Why else would we be talking about on this podcast if it wasn't, right? The Jack the Ripper case occurred during a time when forensic science was in its infancy. The investigation showcased the limitations of the techniques and tools available at the time. As a result, it highlighted the need for advancements in the field. Some key impacts on forensic science include crime scene prevention. The Ripper case emphasized the importance of preserving crime scenes and avoiding contamination of evidence. Future investigations would benefit from greater attention to detail in collecting and preserving physical evidence. Use of forensic pathology. The case demonstrated the need for a better understanding of human anatomy and the application of forensic pathology. In the following years, the field of forensic pathology would grow, becoming an essential part of criminal investigations. And profiling. The inability to identify Jack the Ripper led investigators to develop early concepts of criminal profiling, which would later evolve into a more systematic approach to understanding criminal behavior and identifying suspects. So, the role that the media played was pretty significant in shaping the narrative of the Jack the Ripper case. Some of the ways it influenced the case include sensationalism. Newspapers were eager to capitalize on the public's fascination with the gruesome murders. They often sensationalized the story, fueling fear and hysteria in the general population. Dissemination of information. The media served as the primary means of dismantling information about the case. That is a difficult word. Both accurate and inaccurate. This allowed the public to follow the investigation closely, but it also led to the spread of misinformation and speculation. Creating the myth. The media helped create the enduring myth of Jack the Ripper by giving the killer a memorable name, publishing the alleged letters from the murderer, and emphasizing the mysterious and seemingly supernatural aspect of the case. The Jack the Ripper case has had a lasting impact on the portrayal of serial killers in popular culture. The mysterious killer, the enduring mystery of Ripper's identity, has made the figure a template for subsequent fictional serial killers. The concept of an unknown, enigmatic killer has been used in countless books, movies, and television shows. The brutal nature of the crimes, the gruesome mutilations inflicted by Jack the Ripper have influenced the depiction of violence in crime fiction and media. This has led to a trend of increasingly graphic portrayals of violence in the genre. And the genius criminal. The fact that Jack the Ripper was never caught has contributed to the notion of the serial killer as a criminal mastermind. This idea had been explored in numerous works of fiction, with killers portrayed as intelligent and methodical, always staying one step ahead of law enforcement. Overall, the Jack the Ripper case has had a lasting impact on forensic science, media coverage of crime, and the portrayal of serial killers in popular culture. The fascination with this unsolved mystery endures, continuing to influence crime narratives and investigations more than a century later. The true identity of Jack the Ripper may never be revealed, but the case serves as a chilling reminder of the dark side of humanity and the challenges faced by investigators in the pursuit of justice. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Rabbit Hole Chronicles. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more fascinating stories from the past. I'm Joe Foster, and I'll see you next time.